I remained in touch with them and still to this day remain friendly with all of them from that day to this. I have a terrible fault in that I love starting something. The challenge of beginning something is fabulous, but I get incredibly bored very quickly. And the moment it starts turning into a day job, I'm bored and I want to get out of there. I never wanted to be a manager. I never wanted to be the person behind Genesis organising the lighting rigs to Milan and all that kind of thing, because that to me has always been a really boring thing to do. You've got to answer the phone, you've got to organise promotional gigs, you've got to avoid the interviews where they're going to rip them to shreds and all that. It's no fun anymore, and it becomes a whole lumbering machine. So after we'd started the whole Genesis project off, and it was great fun, I thought it was a terrific album. We put out a couple of singles, didn't do anything, but it was all still good fun. They had then reached the stage where they were about to leave school and go to university or whatever. And they desperately needed to know, should they keep trying to make records, or should they do what most kids at school do and say, well, that was great fun, now let's dump it and get on with our real lives. And their parents were very, very keen for them to get on with being accountants or lawyers or whatever it is that kids from school tend to go into. And I did one of the things that I would never normally do, which is I had a meeting with them and their parents and said, look, 99.9% of the time I would advise young bands not to continue in the business because it never goes anywhere. This is the one time where I actually think you should. I think you've all got a lot of talent and you really should continue in the industry. And I remember feeling nervous about saying it because what I might have been doing is taking people away from careers that they could have had very satisfying and lucrative families and money and become stockbrokers and done all the things that most normal nice kids from Charterhouse would do. Instead, I was pushing them down a road which could have meant disaster. Drug addiction, homelessness, bankruptcy. That's what happens to most of the groups, doesn't it? So I thought to myself, well, I feel very strongly that they're great and they should do so. So I advised them to do it. And they thought about it, went away with their families and came back and said, yes, we have decided we are going to do it. So I then said, well, if you're going to do it, you're probably going to do it without me because that gets boring at that stage. And I introduced them to, they had various different people around who were contacts, who they were sort of slightly being semi-managed by or looking after. And I introduced them, I put them into the hands of a friend of mine who had offices below me in Soho Square. I was up at the top floor of Soho Square and he was sharing offices on the ground floor. And he was a man who used to be a journalist, right, wrote about football, called Tony Stratton Smith. And he was a decent guy. And rather like Ken Jones and Joe Roncaroni, I knew he wouldn't screw them up. And I actually said to him, Tony, you can make a lot of money out of this band. Look after them. Be honest with them. Don't rip them off. They're only young. And then you can do very well with them. And he loved the idea and took them on. And it just went from there. He then signed them to his label, formed a label, Charisma Records, started putting the records out and developed them slowly but surely. I didn't see a lot of them. I mean, they always could call me if they needed anything. But, we've all stayed in touch. And over the years, for instance, when Peter was really about to go bust because of his world music concerts that get huge debts, the kids in the band, which then included Phil Collins, decided to have a Genesis get-together at Milton Keynes to raise some money for Peter so he could pay off his debt. And they asked me if I'd introduce it on stage and all of that sort of thing. We'd bump into each other at numerous gigs. When Peter got involved in all the Amnesty concerts, I used to see him a lot at those because a lot of my friends were on the bill then, people like Sting and Bryan Adams and various others. So I used to pop in and visit him on those when he was doing the gigs. Most of the guys, I bump into them in various places. I've even used them occasionally. When I was producing the Brit Awards, the British Music Awards for a long while, Mike came on and presented one of the awards. So you see people all around. And the nice feeling I have is that when I started them off and I tried to give them some kind of direction, and what they did was they did very well and became very successfully, but they did keep away from the becoming drug addicts, having very unhappy family lives and everything else, and have basically turned into very nice, very decent, contented, satisfied, middle-aged men. Well, that's the way it ought to be. I wouldn't want a whole load of deaths on my conscience.